Hello and welcome back. Please don't forget to complete all assignments and discussions in the module before the posted due date, and of course keep up with the assigned readings. In this lecture, let's begin exploring industrial archaeology. Let's begin with a very general question. What is industrial archaeology? Industrial archaeology is the study of the physical remains and historical record of industrial activities. So what can these remains and historical records teach us? They teach us several things. We can explore labor investment. We can explore who is the labor, how much labor was expended, and how was it organized. We can explore resource use, such as how much fuel, timber, or steel was used or was transported or was smelted. We can explore the broader industrial network at the time. Where were materials or personnel or even supplies coming from? And we can explore the economic impact of industrialism, both locally and regionally. So let's consider the historical context of this paper. This study takes place right in Lumpkin County, right around UNG's Dahlonega campus. And now we can ask, well, what kinds of sites were included in this study? These sites were mining ditches. These are water conveyance features. They were created during the gold rush to transport water to the mines. So if we look in these images, we actually see some of the mining ditches. In the left image, that ditch it's hidden in the woods, but if you look kind of toward the top of the image, and it's kind of the left side a little bit, you see a vertical tree. That tree trunk is right in the ditch. If you look left and right of it, you'll see that the ground slopes up to the left, and then it slopes up to the right a little bit, and then down again. That's the ditch there. And here you can actually see another mining ditch, not down in the ravine, but to the left of the ravine, actually. So these mining ditches were part of Georgia's early gold rush. This gold rush occurred between 1824 and 1848, and then again in the 1860s to the 1890s. These mining ditches led to hydraulic mines. They were mining ditches that transported water to these hydraulic mines. The hydraulic mines used massive water cannons to erode hillsides in search of gold. So here you can see an image of someone using a water cannon. They call these water cannons monitors. And at the top of the image here, you can actually see a big pipe on kind of on a wooden framework. That big pipe would have been coming from the mining ditch, and it takes that water from the ditch, and they're piping it then to the monitors, so they can erode the hillsides and extract the gold then. Much of Lumpkin County was mined out in the 1890s, and this left a devastated landscape that has only begun to partially recover. So let's focus now on the research presented in this article. What kinds of archaeological evidence were studied in the article? Well, maps, digital data, and mining ditches themselves were all studied. So let's begin with these maps. These maps were found by myself and by a student that was working with me at the Lumpkin County Library and one other archaeological report. These maps were originally drafted by surveyors that were paid by the mine owners and operators. These maps were originally the property of the mines, and they would use these maps to map out where their ditches are, where their resources are, and where the gold is. So they knew the whole network of the operation. Gold mining was a very complicated operation in Lumpkin County. And it was a system, a network of ditches and drains and tubes and trestles, all to move water to those monitors so they could erode the hillsides and get the gold. So we have to think about all of these different features, archaeological features that would remain from that gold mining era. Not just the archaeological, the mining cuts themselves, but also all of the other things, the ancillary materials. So what kinds of problems were identified with these maps? Well, we identified quite a few problems. There were some simple cartographic proofreading errors. If you look on the right here, you can see that in the center of these boxes, in each image there's different boxes. These are different grid coordinates. The centers of them have numbers. There's different parcel numbers or lot numbers. And here, both of these are listed as number 672. So, and it says fee, which means that someone owned it and there was a fee to mine it. So 672. When really the northern one is number 673. So we found some minor cartographic errors where they're mislabeling the different lots. And then actually, if you those nice squares, they look absolutely perfect, right? Perfect, nice map. But if you actually look at those squares and you were to overlay them with the modern cartography, those squares are not true squares. They are wonky shapes of irregular shape and size. So we need to think about that. These landlocked corners, they had moved over time, and they'd moved because miners moved the markers to mine their neighbor's land. They were moving markers, the landlot markers. And over time, these things moved so much that these landlots are no longer square. In addition to that, we have to think about how difficult it would have been to actually survey and lay in those property, those corner posts for these lots. And given the topography of Lumpkin County, as well as the forest and vegetation, it would have been very difficult to see those and to actually survey them in nice straight lines. So there was a little bit of error introduced that way as well. So all of these errors, they affected our research project. They made it very difficult to identify the purported locations of mining features. So let's move on to discuss the digital data. There was one primary type of digital data that was collected and studied, and that is a hillshade file. A hillshade file is what you see on the right in this image. It is a file that is derived from LiDAR data. We already spoke about LiDAR data. And you can take that LiDAR data, import it into ArcGIS, and you can create what's called a hillshade. It basically gives you a shaded topography of the land. And you can change the angle of the sun on the image to show different features. So it's imagine having a sandbox with all these different topographic features in the sandbox, and you have a really powerful flashlight, and you can move that flashlight around the sandbox at different angles and different pitches in order to accentuate some of these topographic features. That's what you can do with a hillshade. So we were able to get a hillshade. It's a 3D view of the ground surface with a light source that's then projected digitally to create shadows and show relief. We were able to get that hillshade file through the Lumpkin County GIS department, and we were then able to locate mapped ditches and compare the locations of those ditches with what we see on the hillshade. So on the left, you see one of these maps, and that map shows a ditch running from northeast to southwest, and we were able to look on the hillshade, and sure enough, we see that ditch. Let me move my cursor up here. So here we have, this is the ditch right here. Oh, no, sorry. This is the ditch here, the Barlow ditch. Comes across, and in all reality, the ditch is right here. See the ditch? It's very faint. It follows the contours of the ground, and it does this big thing right here, which corresponds with that little blip here. So this is a road. That's not a ditch. That's a road. But the ditch would have followed the contours because they have to have a very specific slope to that ditch in order to keep the water moving. So they have to follow the contours. So we were able to locate or relocate a lot of these ditch features on the hillshade. And this let us see if sections might remain on the landscape. Because if they show up on the hillshade in the woods, then they're there. If they don't show up on the hillshade, then they might be there, and it might just be very faint on the ground. So let's begin discussing the ditches themselves. What do these ditches look like today? Well, they're about 3 to 8 feet wide at the top and a few feet deep. And this is another picture of a ditch. They curve along the sides of the hills because the ditches had to keep water elevated so that there would be high pressure water at the mines. The ditches were constructed with a fall of 4 inches every 100 feet. These are heavily engineered ditches. There was a lot of engineering involved in mapping these things out and making sure that they maintained that 4-inch to 100-foot slope. So consequently, they needed to follow the contours along the landscape. And this meant that they don't look like roads. Roads somewhat follow the contours of the landscape, but not all that well. A lot of roads will be cut back into hillsides, so they don't follow the contour. These things can't. They have to follow the contour. So let's look at the results of this. This study identified segments of 17 different ditches throughout Lumpkin County. 7 of these were known ditches. How do we know which ditches these were? Well, we have to refer back to our historic maps. Those historic maps will let us know about the Mill Creek Ditch, the Ogle Ditch, the Huff Ditch, the Hand Ditch, the Singleton Ditch, the Briar Patch Ditch, and Pigeon Roost. So some of these ditches are well known. Okay. Other ones are unknown. There are 10 additional ditches that are unknown. These were likely constructed as parts of smaller mining operations, and this demonstrates the ubiquity of these ditches throughout Lumpkin County. These ditches are all over the place in the county, and they are very, very long. The Hand Ditch extends for, I think, close to 30 miles. These are mega earthworks, really. So how do we tell if a ditch is a ditch or something else? Well, using the LiDAR data alone, we can identify where these things may have been and what might be out there. But we don't know for sure that they're ditches. They could be something else, right? So we have to conduct some visits to check these out. So that student I was working with, Matthew O'Leary, he and I visited a few random locations. Most of these locations we identified as ditches, but a few were actually old roads. So we had to eliminate some of these things that we thought were ditches because we identified them as roads. What you see in this map are the ones we identified as ditch fragments themselves. So what kind of challenges did we face when we were doing our spot checks? Well, sometimes in archaeology you face some challenges. We ran into some landowner issues, so not every location could be spot checked. What we did learn from this was that we can use LiDAR data to create a hillshade and use that hillshade to look for earthworks that are mining era earthworks, these mining ditches, that are really, they're not even listed. Many of these are not listed as sites. They're not protected. They're not known as archaeological sites, and they should be. So our next step is to try to learn some more about these and then get them site numbers themselves and have them preserved as sites. So that's it for today. Please ensure that you are keeping up with the assigned reading and completing all assignments and discussions posted in the module before the due date. Thank you.